to talk about how to basically test your gear, whatever gear that you choose, whether that be a uniform. Like right now I'm testing True Specs, basic, well not basic, but their BDU uniform and stuff for people that might be interested or might actually need to have a camouflage pattern or maybe even a flat color. They offer those, so I'm doing a test on that stuff. And also I'm testing an the Alice LBE. It's not exactly complete to what I would use if I was restricted to it. However, I was able to get most of the gear that I would want. So anyways, I'm going to talk about how I'm testing this gear to kind of compare it against others. And I think this would be kind of helpful for people that are getting their setup, you know, their battle belts or whatever Gucci shit that they're buying, and to kind of see if their gear is actually going to live up to par for actual friggin' usage without, you know, leaving a yard sale or being uncomfortable after a good amount of use. And the mosquitoes are out, so they're going to be sucking blood and making me sit here and do this number. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is priority. So you want to make sure that your gear is silent, and this is going to tell you something more than, you know, you're going to Ricky Recon everywhere. You might have straps that'll flop and clank against stuff. You might have gear that's just gonna typically when you're making noise, that's friction, right? So that's friction against your body. That's friction of gear on gear. So one of the easiest way to test that is, so like me, I have canteens. I drink out of both of them, so they're sloshing around a little bit, but it's more of a test to see if that kind of throws off the balance a little bit, or at least how much. So there's not very much gear on gear friction here, so it's not gonna, you know, mess with it, and because that can cause a gear to loosen up over time, or, you know, whatever, increase wear and stuff like that, if maybe you don't want it to actually wear that much. So anyways, the next thing is you want to make sure that you're not getting movement of your gear. So that's one thing you want to look at, is this can kind of move around a bit, but it easily goes back into position. So that's something that is maybe a drawback, but at the same time may not be that bad, because even if it was shifted, it still feels relatively balanced, even though this is kind of putting more tension this way and this one's pulling towards the shoulder. All I need to do is move the shoulder out, and typically when I'm getting in a shooting position, I'm good to go. So the next thing is, now this is kind of an interesting one because you're naturally going to get it because you're going to be carrying a combat load. We don't typically roll around with combat loads all over and added weight to our bodies. Fatigue. So here's where it kind of gets interesting, because if you have good load-bearing equipment, we're talking about fatigue as in cardio fatigue, or feeling that certain muscle groups are just not having it. So naturally there's a couple muscle groups that are going to be fatigued. Legs, and maybe the lower back, depending on what you have. If it's balanced out, your lower back may not feel the strain as much, but your legs are typically going to do it. They're the ones that are moving you around. Maybe your arms are doing it if you're getting a bear crawl, your shoulders and stuff, but you know, you got to spot some of those things. So you're looking to make sure that your gear is pretty well balanced to minimize the muscle groups that are actually fatigued, and then you can even work on that in a fitness or conditioning plan in the future. So, and I'll cover that in a video later on. So the next thing you want to do is, in order to test a lot of this stuff, is you want to do rushes and move from position to position. That is not a bad thing to do, because rushes, you'll see if you're going to leave a yard sale if you have good retention on your gear, and retention is one of the biggest things. You don't want to be losing your magazines and stuff like that when you're doing rushes and you're going into positions like you run and then immediately get into the kneeling. What you can end up doing is that can actually, or if you're going from a kneeling to immediately bursting up and moving, I've seen plenty of times where the weight of the magazines and, you know, kicking it can actually toss out some things. So retention is not a bad thing, and typically you want to reload behind cover. Some people might want that emergency mag in case, you know, they're dealing with a bonsai rush or whatever they're preparing for. I see that a lot with CQB elements like SWAT and the FBI HRT teams, some direct action forces, and that's actually a great idea, but make sure that's got maximum retention, not to where you can't pull it out. But if you're testing your gear, make sure that you're not basically gonna lose it in a yard sale when you're actually moving and maybe bumping up against stuff. So anyways, that's a good thing to see. So also how much doing like bear crawls and getting on your belly and actually going and doing different positions will tell you if your gear is getting in the way of your legs, if you're not actually able to get into a good prone, and if you're just pushing on your diaphragm. That's not a good thing. This LBE system is very easy to set up. However, one of the problems I encountered, just as a note, not really as a review, but this buckle actually came undone one time when I was doing a very low crawl and dragging it along the ground. Other than that, everything was good, but that was a note that I came away with just as an example of what you can find when you're actually testing your gear, trying to stay under the radar and try to avoid fire. So the next thing is you have some things that you need to look for. As I said, with positions, you need to make sure that you have full range of motion. And also the next thing is, when you're in these positions, can you lean out without having to counterbalance, or it's throwing you off balance because the weight is not really well balanced. That's something you need to look for. So the other thing is ease of use for the equipment. Make sure that it's in a good area. When you're stressed or you're in different positions, you might not be able to reach, like, say, this magazine pouch, or if you have other ammo right here, this might just be when you can, or when you're still fresh on energy, moving your belt over and getting your reload done, if you have time, might actually be a good option if you're stuck with that, like I am right here, because these shoulder straps are attached to the ammunition carrier. It's just the way Alice LBE worked. So the next thing is, make sure that you're watching for what muscle groups are strained, and make sure that you're doing the proper lifts when you can. When you can do these proper lifts, you're working on certain areas that are getting strained, and maybe even working in the gear in those strained positions. Like if you're having lower back issues, do like squats where you're bent over and stuff like that to help support your lower back. This is something you typically see in chest rigs if you're not balanced out with a pack, which if you're running in combat, you're not going to have that luxury typically. So next thing is, you want to see how fast you're getting fatigued, and this may be an issue of working with your gear a little bit more, and I would recommend incremental growth. As soon as you start getting really tired, just go ahead and call it quits for that day. And incremental growth of your cardiovascular system is really good. You don't want to burn it out too much and put too much strain on your cardiovascular system, because the veins are going to need healing too, right? So next thing is, of course, you want to make sure that your gear isn't moving, and if it is moving, is it really something that is like for example, is this really a big deal? Not really, because I could actually move it. Like if I had a holster here, I would be able to support hand draw a pistol, and if it is going to move, make sure that it can be moved back into position pretty easily, that it doesn't get hung up on stuff, and maybe just a quick body movement could actually shift it back. But so far, this is a good example of something where it has movement, but it's really not that big of a deal. So anyways, I came up with a course to basically test this. As you see here, I've actually got these barriers. I don't know if you can see this. I've got them labeled. One, I've got this, this one's got a label here, 2, and then another one, 2, so it's a different kind of barrier. This is basically this is my test for a lot of gear, like being able to lean out. Like I have to lean out this side, I have to shoot through a hole, so I have to get a little bit lower, low crawling up to this position, so the under fire movement, and then moving quickly from position to position. And then you see this gap right here. I have to move quickly and low to the deck in order to get across. And this is a good test because when you're throwing weight around like this, it can be very hard for your legs to actually control it and then quickly get into a position to shoot around a barrier, and you got to stay low. So this can show a lot of the strain when you're in an unconventional position. And that's mostly what you're going to encounter is unconventional positions, because we don't have the luxury of getting into a perfect, lean out. Maybe you have to shoot one hand with a pistol. And now that gets me into the next phase is how are you going to do this? You can do this with no weapons, and you can kind of ghost it, or you can actually, like I like to start out with a pistol and I try to use two hands. However, a lot of times when I get imbalanced, I'm like, oh, and I have to shoot one-handed. This is actually a pretty good skill to have, be able to shoot one-handed around a barrier. Pull the trigger without moving the gun, right? And the next one is using a rifle, maybe even a combination when you're trying to test your gear. So, it's not just moving from barrier to barrier and rushing, but basically you're low crawling, you're bear crawling, doing as much of a combination as you can, running up as a counter attack maybe, just keeping on the move in these different kind of movements to kind of see how your gear is doing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut to basically showing a course of fire that I do. I'm not going to be using any live ammunition. There's no real need to at this point. It could just be a waste in the end if you don't really have a good technique down, and you might be disappointed in your results until you feel like you're getting more steady kind of surgeon hands by the time you get done with your own course. And of course these things can be done like in the home pretty slowly, and then find out how your equipment works, and then kind of test it wherever you can. I have a range in my backyard, so I'm free to do as I wish. So anyways, let's go ahead and cut to that course, and I'll go ahead and give you guys a little bit of an evaluation as we go along. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and run through my course. I'm going to be followed by camera lady. Kind of hard to do everything on a tripod and still be able to speak, and but anyways, you can actually, since I got my own rules on my range and I'm competent with my weapons and being safe, I fully load my magazine but having no round in the chamber, obviously. Now if you want to do this with live fire, that's up to you. Like if you're actually on a range that can do that, that's up to you. I would just recommend some caution at first, going slower before, but I'm not going to do that. I don't exactly have the range to test all that, but if you do, great. But if you're using a pistol, you should be able to. Now I'm working in the woods here, so I've got a lot of uneven terrain, so I'm sorry if the camera's rocking a little bit. It can be kind of hard to keep up. But anyways, I'll do the best I can to kind of walk you guys through what's happening and what I'm noticing, just as an example of what you want to keep your eye on. So the big thing here is trying to go as fast as you can comfortably. Now around here, probably going to scrape up my knees, bruise them a little bit, being that there's a lot of exposed roots. But anyways, my course starts out from here behind a little bit of root concealment. This really is not really good cover for like rifle rounds or whatever, but I'm going to use a rifle because this can be kind of unwieldy to use when you're trying to throw your weight around and get around. So anyways, start out from here, and then if you want to time it, probably wouldn't be that bad of an idea. And I'm going to wait for this chopper to pass. Okay, so it wasn't a chopper, it was a plane, but they both use propellers, who cares? So one of the things you might want to consider is starting from maybe a kneeling or even a standing position, and this will test being able to get into the prone really fast. Like if you have a chest rig, you're probably going to push on your stomach, but maybe not too much depending on how you have your weight, and see how it throws it around, getting into a position such as that. But I'm running Alice LBE gear, so it's not really going to be too bad. My recommendation is not to go from the low ready, if you will, but to kind of do the under the armpit. This allows more control. That's just something that I noticed even with a bullpup. So anyways, my start would be basically from here and then get down into the prone and spot my targets and just, you know, bang and bang. And then from here you can transition to maybe a kneeling and bang, bang, and go to your targets from there. And from here you're going to go back into the prone. Since I got a low area here, I'm going to want to stay out of the line of fire, so this is a great way to test your gear. So camera lady will follow along, and I'm going to low crawl into the next position, which will be the table over there. So as I got up to here, I was dragging my gear along. Before, when I was testing this, my belt actually came unbuckled when I was going back, because I'll go this way and then back. Pretty good cardio test. It can be kind of difficult because you're trying to drag your gear, it's getting snagged on the ground, trying to maintain control of your rifle and go with that, but you're trying to move as fast as you can, so you will notice that you're going to get kind of dirty with that. And that's one of the things you got to test, and of course the issues with the elbows and the knees scraping on the ground, trying to move as fast as you can. So from here you immediately get up into the kneeling, at least in my course, and then you pop up and bang. Then I got to get around this other tire, bang, and then from here low crawl under this and then bear crawl over to the tires or the other barriers. Now from here, one of the big things that you want to consider is you don't want to gap. You don't want to sit here, you know, turn around and rest before you do your engagement, unless you want this to be a separate part where you're basically sitting here and then you're rushing up to engage targets around here, then you can do that. But most of the time, this is going to be unconventional positions because of how low this is. So anyways, you bear crawl up to this position and immediately start in an engagement on one of the targets. Bang. And then from here quickly transition to shooting right here, at least in my course. One of the big things to consider is if you're doing a lean out with a rifle, muzzle, sight muzzle offset. So you don't want to hit your own barriers, right? So you have to keep things in mind as you're going around, and this is where fatigue can kind of play a part, because you're trying to be efficient, but you're also trying to limit the fatigue that you're experiencing. So going here, bang, and then moving over, and then of course engaging from here as best you can. So bang, bang, and then moving around, bang, bang, and then from here I move all the way over to this, and this is where it's very vital that you learn how to rush, and this is where it's going to test the momentum of your gear and how it can throw you off. So this comes into your combat conditioning or combat fitness, how you're gonna, the muscles that you're gonna have to work on in order to stabilize yourself with this gear. And maybe just running through these courses would be good enough to get used to it. So basically rushing over and then immediately engaging. And this is the most challenging part, is when you stop yourself. You might have your leg up like this, but you might want to drop it and just go around. That's one of the things that I like to try to do, but I'm not always successful in doing that. So I engage from here, and then, so I'm doing a lot of left and right leaning immediately, transferring very fast, and this can help with evaluating the balance of your gear, because sometimes you might be leaned back, you might be leaned a little forward, too much forward, to where you immediately have to brace yourself. That's just something you need to keep in mind. And again, this comes down to how you're fit for these little courses and testing how your gear works with these quick movements. So it's not like a static range where all you're doing is beep, beep, you know, all that other stuff. You got to think on the move and be careful of how high you are, which I'm pretty sure I failed that. I got popped in the dome most likely coming over here, so that's something I need to work on. So then coming around here, bang, and then I move on to barrier 3, where I'm going to be rushing again, getting past this opening. So basically, bang, bang, and then coming around here, bang, and then as you see, you can kind of get thrown off balance if you have a good amount of weight. And then from here, I basically rush to this other position, and this is where, again, it's going to throw you off because you got to turn immediately and start engaging. Bang, bang. And that is basically the end of my course. Now, one other thing that I have done is immediately do like a counterattack type of situation where immediately I'm already tired out from moving position to position and engaging safely and being aware of everything, my muzzle offset, how I'm staying, you know, behind cover and not exposing myself, and also, you know, how fast I'm transitioning my weapon around. If you like to go to another shoulder or whatever, how fast you're able to do that and be aware of everything and controlling your weight. So the next thing would be like running up that hill, but I'm not going to do that right now. Basically, big sprint, as I said, kind of a counterattack, getting into position, and then once you get closer to the top of the hill, you want to low crawl just to keep your profile low. You don't want to jump up and silhouette yourself because you're an instant target. You're just a pop-up target, and it's a turkey shoot at that point. So anyways, that's really the best way that I've found to test your gear. And as you notice, I didn't use a sling. This is all about testing how well you can keep control. I don't like to use my sling I don't like to use my sling at first when I'm testing gear because I can see how well I can control the weapon when I get fatigued. However, a sling is very vital to see if it's gonna hang up, but that's something I would do eventually once I get more comfortable with seeing where the balance is, because I have a lot of areas where the sling could actually hang up that I might want to tape up. So there's so many things that you need to kind of be aware of. Also, working with a pistol, maybe you can advance to doing with live ammunition or 30 dry fires or whatever, counting your fake rounds and then doing a transition to a pistol. That's where a sling would come into play, and seeing how your rifle, you know, drags along the ground, or if you're able to engage with a pistol and then move it to the back or whatever. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do, and you can find the weaknesses in your platform. Today, I found out that it's really hard to stop myself when I'm rushing, and also the balance really is not that good. I fell over a couple times. Not embarrassed of it. That's the discovery process for your gear. See what works for you, maybe shifting stuff around, going to the prone, seeing what's uncomfortable. The test I did with this buckle, I want to upgrade this buckle to an actual black buckle, stuff like that. That's just my evaluation of this gear. Other than that, it's pretty well balanced. I just got to deal with, getting my core more up to par as far as controlling it and stuff like that on the lean, and controlling how far I go out or the rate of it. So many notes to take from this. So anyways, I hope you guys appreciated this video, and you guys have a good one.